So happy New Year, everyone. Happy 2022. Thank you for joining us. So this year, this is going to be your New Year's resolution. So instead of or addition to reducing your junk food intake or reducing the amount of money you spend or reducing the time being sedentary, we are also all vowing to try to reduce our waste. This is our second waste audit is a new year. It is our third annual event. The first year we didn't do it as a New Year's activity, but we thought what a perfect way to spend New Year's. So our waste audit is designed basically to increase your waste literacy and also to help you reduce your waste. So let's get started. Welcome. The Home Waste Audit is a collaborative science project, hosted by us, the U of T trash team, and fueled by our community, which is everyone in this Zoom room. So today we're going to take you through a short presentation that covers who we are, gives a background on waste with a focus on plastic waste, and instructions for our home waste audit. But before we do, we want to introduce ourselves, acknowledge the land upon which we work, and talk a little bit about who the trash team is. So today you have two hosts, myself and Hannah DeFrond. So my name is Chelsea. I'm one of the co-founders of the U of T trash team. I'm also a researcher in microplastics. I've been working in this field for quite some time, and I really feel passionate about this topic. So thank you all for joining. My New Year's resolution this year is to wear all my clothes, not at the same time, but at least make sure I wear them. And if I don't, then I'm going to donate them because I don't want to keep things in my closet I'm not using. I'm going to let Hannah introduce herself. Go ahead, Hannah.
Okay, thanks, Chelsea. So I'm Hannah. I'm a member of staff at the U of T trash team, and I also coordinate the International Trash Trap Network, which is a partnership between the trash team and the Ocean Conservancy. And my New Year's resolution is to learn to cook some new recipes.
Awesome. Thank you, Hannah. You can come make me dinner if you want. So each of you are now our fellow scientists. And to help us better understand the diversity of our data, can you please each type where you are from in the chat? And this is going to be important for one of the surveys that you have coming up. So let us know what city you live in. And if that city is not in the province of Ontario, maybe let us know what state or province that city is in. Wonderful. So we've got a bit of diversity here. We've got lots of Toronto. But I do see somebody from LaSalle, Collingwood, Mississauga. Perfect. Okay. And I also see that Mr. Rudolph has joined us. So we have a teacher here who has a class that's interested in participating or planning to participate in the waste audit. Mr. Rudolph, are your students here or are you planning to have them watch this separately? Just out of curiosity. And welcome.
Hi, yeah, I am a teacher at Central Etobicoke, and my students are going to be participating in the survey. I told them a bit about it. I'm just going to write where I'm from.
Perfect.
Yeah, so that's basically it.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm sorry, I mispronounced and I should have said Ms. Rudolph.
That's okay.
Thank you so much for joining.
That's all right.
Okay, so we've got some diversity in this room in terms of cities, which you'll see how that becomes important in our data collection later. So excellent. Okay, so before we begin and tell you a bit about who we are, the U of T trash team, it's important to recognize the history of the lands in which we call home. So we are thrilled to have people joining us from all over, and we want to extend our acknowledgements to the Indigenous and traditional past across all territories. For our team, we will speak to the land on which the University of Toronto operates. So for thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. So today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land, and particularly for us to work on trying to clean and mitigate plastic pollution from this land. Okay, so who are we? So our team is made up of volunteers, students, and early career researchers working toward a shared goal to increase waste literacy in our community while reducing plastic pollution in our ecosystems. We formed in 2017, so we are becoming about 4 years old. And it was in collaboration with my lab at the university. Being an arm of a research lab and university, we have a foundation in science helping to provide and communicate the facts that our goal is to ultimately inform the solutions. Our mission and vision are all around increasing waste literacy, like connecting with people like today while having fun and taking action. We take a positive approach to our work and are rooted in science and evidence-based solutions. And we use education, public outreach, and scientific research to deliver evidence-based solutions to decrease solid waste and promote a circular economy. We have 3 main work streams. These are community outreach, education, and solutions-based research. And the really nice thing about our waste audit is it sort of extends across all 3 of these things. We are lucky enough to have amazing artists on our team, particularly one named Maddie Milne, who helped us build our theory of change. This is this here. She drew this. And basically, this is how we work. So you can see scientific evidence provides the foundation for our work. And through our 3 connected work streams, we work locally to build collaborations globally to ultimately reduce plastic pollution. We couldn't do this without the energy of our volunteers, of which there are almost 100, who make it possible to achieve our goals related to policy, healthy ecosystems, and engaged communities. And many of our volunteers are in this room, so I just want to acknowledge them and say thank you. If you have any questions about the U of T trash team or you want to join us, please don't hesitate to ask during the Q&A. And of course, you can also visit our website to learn more. But let's get to the reason why you came here tonight and dive straight into our Home Waste Audit New Year's edition. So as I said earlier, this project is designed to help us each change our own personal habits to protect our planet. This project has 2 personal objectives. One is to learn about the waste stream in the municipality in which you live, meaning learning what bins you have, the recycling, the landfill, or organics, and what goes in each of them. 2, it is to decrease your personal waste footprint and divert waste away from your landfill bin by procuring and using products that you can reuse or that go into the other bins, like the recycling. The data that you collect will help you track your progress, and our collective shared data will enable us to see how diverse waste streams are across the geographies or the cities in which you live, and how waste literacy and change behaviors can reduce waste. The data will be anonymized, synthesized, and shared in our second webinar. If you have any questions about that, feel free to ask during the Q&A, or you can always email us at any time during this process. So if you have questions during the presentations, please feel free to go ahead and write them in the chat. Susan will be monitoring the chat throughout, and so will Rafaela. Feel free to put these in there at any time. Otherwise, we'll save them until the Q&A at the end, in which case you'll have an opportunity to either type them in the chat or raise your hand and ask them verbally. So then without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Hannah, who's going to talk to you about some of the background on the issue of waste and plastic pollution. Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you. Okay, so before I begin going into the background of the plastic waste problem, I wanted to take a second and ask everyone to just have a look around the room that you're sitting in and watching this webinar from. So if it's your living room, take a look around. If it's your kitchen, have a look around and think about all the items you can see around you that are made of plastic. So for example, I'm sitting on a chair that's got plastic parts. I'm attending this webinar on my laptop, which is made of plastic. I have a plastic mouse in front of me and a plastic keyboard. So have a little look and just take note of how many items you can see directly in front of you or around you. And if someone cannot see any plastic, I will be extremely shocked and impressed because it's used so much in our day-to-day lives and we use it every day. And it's something that we use all the time. And there are some obvious reasons why plastics have become something that we use every day. And that's because firstly, plastic is cheap and it's fast to produce compared to other natural materials that we could use as alternatives. It's lightweight also in comparison to glass or other containers that can save energy when shipping because a heavier truck requires more gas. Plastics are also very durable and can be manufactured to be extremely rigid, flexible or heat resistant, for example, And so it's useful for many different reasons. And because of its many different forms, plastic is a unique material with lots of valuable functions, including for medicine, we use it, and everyone knows now because of the pandemic how much we use it for PPE. We also use it for safety and protection, so helmets, for example, when you're cycling. We use it for communication, like I just mentioned, the laptops or phones that we use all the time or we might be watching this webinar from, and also transport. It makes up lots of different parts of cars and airplanes and all sorts of different transportation. So it is very useful in many ways. But plastic has now infiltrated every single part of our lives. So most people can't go one day or even a few hours without touching something or using something made of plastic. And so while there are valuable uses for it, there are also many items that we use that are not so necessary. And in particular, these include single-use items and unnecessary packaging, like the items shown here in these images. And these items are often made from non-recyclable plastics, and these end up straight in landfills or in the environment when they're thrown away. And whilst looking at these images, also take a moment to think about if you've used any of these over the last few days. If you've thrown them in your bin, they might be something to look out for when you're doing your home waste audit. And Chelsea, if you click the next, then we can see how each example of these items has ended up in the environment, and it's been documented over the years. So it's a very unhappy crab in the middle. Go next slide. Okay, so since the 1950s, plastic production has increased exponentially because of such high demand and the high consumption that we use it in. So by 2017, we produced approximately 8,300 million metric tons of virgin plastics. And plastic is now a really big business, and the current market value of plastic products is 1.2 trillion US dollars. And so you might be able to see from the figure on the screen that the production is getting faster year by year. All the waste generated, which is that black line. Half of all the plastics ever manufactured have been made in the last 15 years. And so if these trends continue, by 2050, we'll have produced 26 billion metric tons of plastic waste. Our plastic consumption habit, fueled by the endless supply of disposable products, has outpaced waste management, which has resulted in a huge amount of plastic waste escaping our waste systems and reaching the environment. And you might previously have heard the estimate that around 8 million metric tons of plastic waste enters our oceans every year. We now know that this number is likely a lot higher when we consider waste from inland sources, increased production, and the plastic that ends up on land, in rivers, and in lakes. And in a study that Rafa's just posted in the chat that was published, that Chelsea and I were co-authors on, we estimated that in 2016, up to 23 million metric tons of plastic entered aquatic environments. And what's more, is even with all the current efforts that we have to reduce plastic pollution at the moment, if we keep producing and using plastic at current rates, this number could reach 53 million tons by 2030, which is actually not that far away now. So the problem with all this plastic in the environment is that it doesn't decompose, it degrades. So every piece of plastic that's ever been made still exists in some form, likely in smaller fragments and microplastics. But because it never goes away, it persists and it accumulates and builds up in the environment, and now we find it everywhere. It's also more than just an eyesore when we have it in the environment. Plastic threatens the health and survival of wildlife due to hazards related to entanglement, ingestion, and the chemicals associated with plastics. And these are both additives from production and also pollutants which plastics absorb from the environment. Okay, so I'm going to pause for a quick question and see what you think the answer to this is. So the question is, I'll post it in the chat so you can all see it as well. What percentage of all plastic ever made globally do you think has been recycled? And you can type your answers in the chat. Okay, so we've got 10, 8, 20, 11, all quite low. 25, 10, 9, 5, 6. Lots of very pessimistic people in the webinar today. 7, 14, 5. So we're all thinking kind of similar numbers, nothing above about 25% so far. So thank you everyone for your guesses. And Chelsea, you can reveal it on the next slide. So for those of you who posted in the chat your answers, you were all kind of in the right ballpark. Of all plastic waste that's ever been produced, just 9% has been recycled, and 79% has ended up in landfills in the environment, and 12% has been incinerated. So we can see that it's not very much, and you were all correct to be pessimistic in your guesses, because much of the waste that ends up that we use ends up in landfills. So the waste that does end up in landfills is avoidable. And approximately about 40% of plastic produced every year is single-use packaging, which is used just once and discarded. So the things that we don't necessarily need to be throwing away in the first place. So it's true that recycling alone won't solve our plastic pollution problem, but it definitely helps. So plastic cannot be recycled infinitely, but every item that's recycled reduces the amount that's going to landfill, and it also reduces the amount of energy that's required to make new items. And plastic is made from oil, which is a fossil fuel. So by reducing oil demands for plastic production, recycling also reduces greenhouse gas emissions and therefore reduces the effects of climate change. And importantly, as I've mentioned, it contributes to the diversion of waste from landfill. And sending waste to landfill should be the final option after refusing, reducing, reusing, and recycling. And by using something once and throwing it away, this encourages continued consumption of fossil fuels and the creation of new products. And also landfill space is finite and eventually it will run out. So we must prioritize alternative ways to deal with our waste. Waste in landfills can also contaminate groundwaters, and it can contribute to air pollution as the waste decomposes. Not all landfills are perfectly engineered and contained, and often landfill is actually not the final endpoint for plastic waste. As we saw before, it's kind of landfill / environment. So when waste leaks out of landfills, it pollutes the surrounding environments. So what can we do about this? So on an individual level, there are 3 main ways we can tackle the problem of plastic pollution in the environment. The first is to reduce consumption. So that's by using less plastics and not contributing to the need for increased production. The second is waste management, which is improving waste management at home in this example and in our local areas. And third is clean up pollution from the environment itself. And so our home waste audit was developed when we couldn't really clean up together outside over the last few months or however many months. So we decided to focus on how to reduce plastic consumption and improve waste management at home, which is the middle. Thank you. So we strongly believe in the power of the individual, and even small changes that you make on an everyday basis can make a huge difference. So for example, in Canada, we produce approximately 3.3 million tons of plastic waste every year, and 85% of this goes to landfills. So that's greater than the global average. And much of this waste is single-use plastic, which can be avoided. And voting with your wallet does work, as consumption drives production. So if we're refusing to buy these single-use items or unnecessary packaged items, we make it known that we don't want these products. And we've seen in some examples over the recent few years that if eventually people aren't buying those things, eventually we'll see less of it on the shelves, because it might be economical for businesses to use plastic over other materials, but it's not economical for them to keep making things that no one is buying. And finally, it's also important to know before you throw and learn which items can go in which bin, because even if you're buying less plastic and using less, producing less waste, we want to make sure things that can be recycled are recycled. So we've all had that moment where we're not sure if something should go in the recycling bin or not. And in this situation, some people might wish cycle, which is when you throw these items in the recycling bin in the hope that they'll get recycled anyway, but you're not quite sure. And in reality, this can, if you're not correct and the item can't be recycled, this can contaminate your recycling bin. So they'll count the bin as contaminated and won't recycle those items, making it less likely that the stuff that should be recycled will actually get recycled. And in Canada, upwards of 25% of the waste put in recycling bins is actually non-recyclable and considered contamination. And also, finally, it can be confusing to try and remember where to throw your trash, especially because recycling guidelines differ between countries and states and provinces, cities, and even municipalities and districts. And this is due to differences in recycling facilities and what they can and can't process in each location. So I have multiple examples of this because when I moved to Canada from the UK, I had different recycling guidelines to learn in Toronto, and I'm now over in Vancouver, and I had different recycling guidelines to learn again. And it's just a learning process and trying to make sure that I'm putting everything in the right bins. And that the reason is because some materials recovery facilities are more advanced and they're able to process mixed materials. And in Toronto, I think there's a lot of items that can be recycled that can't be recycled in other areas of Canada. And some materials recovery facilities can only reprocess certain types of plastic, for example. So it's really important to learn what the guidelines are in your local area and make sure you keep up to date with those because they can change. And I think that leads us into our instructions for our home waste audit. So Chelsea, I will hand back over to you and she's going to tell you a bit more about how it's all going to work.
Thank you, Hannah. Okay, so tomorrow begins your personal home waste audit. This audit includes 3 overarching tasks. So 1 is webinars like today. 2 is the actual home waste audit. So that's where you're counting and characterizing your waste. That's the actual data collection. Although there's more data collection for us, and that is the online surveys. And those guide increased waste literacy. Hopefully, you have already completed survey 1 before you came onto this webinar tonight. And by the end of this webinar, you'll have only 1 webinar left. For this project, all you technically need is a piece of paper, a pencil, or you can use your computer. If you don't want to print the data sheets, you can make things on your own data sheets. You can do everything online. It is completely up to you. I'll show you what I did, but it's your choice. If you do everything on a computer, you just type your answers into that data sheet. Regardless, you will eventually because that's how you hand it back to us. You'll also be receiving all of the links to all of the surveys and all of the data sheets and other resources you need via emails, many of which you've already received. And those all come from Eventbrite. If anything is ever unclear, you can always reach out. We do not mind. And we promise we will try not to clutter your inbox. And so we'll be careful to only send you what you need to reduce email waste. Okay, now I'm going to carefully go through the instructions 1 week at a time. But if I miss anything or it's not clear, please feel free to ask a question during the Q&A. Okay, so week 1, which literally starts tomorrow. So task 1 is to attend the webinar, which you're doing right now, and take the entrance survey, which hopefully you already have. Then during week 1, it's really important that you're going to start auditing your household waste, but under a business as usual scenario. So over this 7-day period, you're going to quantify and characterize the waste you produce in your landfill bin and your recycle bin. And I'll go over this in a second. But what does it mean to be business as usual? So this week is your baseline, which means we want you to be able to use it to compare to the other weeks as you start to try to reduce your waste. So in order to properly measure our baselines and how our increased knowledge and changed behaviors reduce our waste, we must not change our behaviors yet. So for now, continue business as usual. To prepare, I suggest printing or preparing your data sheets and having them ready. I'd have the instructional guide either up on your computer or printed to follow along during the 4-week period. So what I decided to do when I did my home waste audit was I logged my waste weekly at the end of the week. So I would literally at the end of the week dump out my garbage onto the floor, somewhere that you don't mind if it gets a little dirty, and I would tally my data on my own piece of scrap paper, and then I would use that data eventually to go on the data sheet. You are also welcome to collect data as you throw. That means every single person in your house has to be really on board with what you're doing. So that's an easier scenario if you live alone, or you have someone who's just as keen as you are. So what you're going to do is you're going to record the quantity of each type of item you dispose in the bin, and I'm going to go over the instructions for the data sheets later, and you can also find them on our website. So this means that at the end of each week, and in this case, if you start on time, it'll be Tuesdays. If you start a little bit later, that's okay. Just make sure you follow your 7-day period. So what I would do is I would collect all of my different waste bins that collect non-recyclable waste that goes to landfill in my house. I would combine them. So I would take from the office and from the laundry room and from the kitchen and from the bathroom, and I would combine them all into my largest bin, which is in the kitchen. And then once that bin was full, I would take all of that landfill waste. I would dump it out and to me onto my porch. You can do this on a tarp if you want. It's a little cold outside. And I would tally my litter onto my homemade data sheet here out of scrap paper. But I'll show you what this actual data sheet looks like. So the data will eventually go onto this sheet. Here I've transcribed all of the data that I wrote down onto an electronic data sheet. And this way it's ready to turn in at the end of the 4-week period. I want to note a couple things. Oops, sorry, not these things. The notes here. So you're going to type in this important data, and then when it gets to this notes, you might want to take notes on something. For example, if I go to Costco that week, I know I'm going to produce more waste. If I have maybe a special celebration or something, I might produce more waste if I have a couple people over for a birthday or something. So it's important to think about what these anomalies may be so that if your data does wiggle in a way that you weren't expecting, you maybe have reasons why. So please feel free to use the notes sheet. I want to show you what the actual data sheet looks like really quick. So here, this is the Excel sheet that you'll get. There's the same sheet for week 1, week 2, week 3, and week 4. The one thing I want you to notice is kind of the detail of data we want you to focus on. So you can exclude things like dust or hair or something that is not really garbage or waste that you produce. If you rip a box and put multiple pieces in the garbage, just count it as the one box. But I also want to discuss sort of the level of detail that we're looking for here. So you do break your waste up into plastic, paper, metal, glass, and mixed materials, as well as other. We are looking for things like a plastic spoon or plastic cutlery, maybe a plastic cup or a drink bottle. You don't have to be detailed about the brand that you used, and you don't have to be detailed about like the type of. I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Like if you have a Coca-Cola bottle and then also a water bottle, you can just say a plastic drink bottle versus like a soda versus water. So not too much detail. The other thing that's tricky is sometimes these types of materials. So I want to do a little quiz. So be ready to type things in the chat. And the first one I want you to say is which of these categories, plastic, paper, metal, glass, or mixed materials, or other, would you put styrofoam? What is styrofoam? Is it a plastic? Is it a paper? Is it a metal? Is it a glass? Or is it a mixed material? Good, we've got some answers coming in, and it is a plastic. And I gotta tell you, for those of you that maybe were afraid because you weren't quite sure, it's a tricky one, but it is plastic. The second one is another bit of a tricky one, and that is floss. What is dental floss, like your normal brand of dental floss? Is it plastic? Is it paper? Is it a metal? Is it a glass? Is it a mixed material? We got lots of plastic, and then we have a mixed. So most of it is plastic. Some flosses that you buy might be mixed, but for the most part, it is plastic. Sometimes people buy one that's like a fancier material with a wax around it, but generally plastic. Next one, compostable plastic cup. Is a compostable plastic cup plastic, mixed material, paper, metal, glass? Yeah. So this one's tricky. It is plastic. So a plastic compostable cup tends to be made out of PLA for most of the time, polylactic acid, which is a plastic. So a plastic compostable cup in Toronto, as you will learn. Well, I'm not going to tell you. You're going to figure this out if you don't know already, or you could look it up if you're curious. Next is a cigarette butt. Is a cigarette butt plastic, paper, metal, glass, mixed material? It is a mixed material. And that mix is paper and plastic. Okay, next is like a chip bag. So imagine like a bag of sun chips or a bag of kettle chips that has like a little, maybe it's like shiny, silvery in the middle. Is that mixed material? Is it plastic? Is it metal? Is it paper? Oh, that's a mixed. It's a mixed material. That's right. What about a Tetra Pak, like a milk carton or like a box of almond breeze? Mixed material. You guys are good. Final one, a disposable paper coffee cup. So if you go to a coffee shop and you get a coffee cup, mixed, plastic, paper, metal, disposable paper coffee cup. Mixed. You guys are good. It is paper with plastic on the inside. Okay. Awesome. All right. You've done good. If you have questions, look it up or feel free to email us at any time. It's fine. And if you put something in a place and we catch it, Hannah will shift it for you as she's going through the data. But we won't do that unless we feel 100% sure we know where you will land. Okay. Next, you're going to do the exact same thing for the recycle bin. And here, I only have one bin, so I don't have to mix bins from around the house. And for those of you that might be wondering, do I have to sort through my really stinky, rotting green bin? The answer is no. Congratulations, you don't have to touch it. Your green bin is not part of the home waste audit. If you live in a place where you don't have a green bin and you mix your organics with your litter bin, um, it may be in your best interest this week to keep your organics out of your bin if you're going to go through it at the end and add it at the end because it gets a little stinky and gross. I'll leave that up to you. Okay. So now time for another quick poll question, and this one is going to be in a different software. So you're getting really all of the hot corners of my computer screen here. So what I want you to do is go to www.menti.com and you should be able to see the code here. And I should be able to copy the link and put the link straight into the chat. And so you can also just go to the link in the chat and go ahead and answer that question. What do you think your most common waste items will be? I think it will allow you to put 2. What do you think will be common in your bin? This is the bin going in to your landfill. What do you think your most common waste items will be? Plastic what? Plastic is fine. That's fair. You can do that. But maybe we'll go a little more detail. Food packaging. Plastic water bottles. Yeah. I can tell you one thing that really surprised me when I did my audit was the amount of tea bags that I used, which then made me think I should really buy loose leaf tea. Did I do it? I can say I haven't yet. The other thing that surprised me was like the junk mail that would enter my mailbox, which I did solve that problem. Awesome. Yeah, toilet paper roll. Paper and newspaper. Food cans, so aluminum cans for sure. Food packaging is definitely a big one. Alcohol wipes. So actually one thing we're really curious about this time is whether we're going to see any differences due to COVID. So whether we'll see more disposable masks as those are becoming more commonly used, whether we're going to see bits from at-home testing kits. We don't know. We have done a waste audit twice now during COVID, but we still might see some changes. Okay, awesome. Thank you all. Go back to the slides. At the end of week 1, you're going to complete survey 2. I think this survey is incredibly important. They're all very important. This survey in particular really helps you understand your personal waste stream and helps increase your waste literacy by learning more about that local waste management so that you can kind of track changes in your own behavior. But in total, there are 4 surveys. And after this survey, after week 1, you'll be halfway there. Weeks 2 and 3 are really no different than week 1, except for that now you can begin to try to reduce your waste. So you're done with your baseline, and now you're starting to follow the steps in the waste or the solutions hierarchy that you see here. Really important to remember, this is not a competition. We will not be judging you on how much or little waste you produced. We are interested in the differences we all can make over our waste production over time. And so once we have all that data, we will synthesize it, but we will analyze it anonymously. So when we show it to you in webinar 2, no one will know whose data is whose data. So please just do this the best you can and think about what you gain from it. I think one of our favorite things about this is that everyone learns something new when they do the home waste audit. And even if one behavior changes and sticks, then that's a real win. And of course, what you can do can be a little bit overwhelming to find information online. The internet is a bit like drinking water from a fire hose. And we also know that change is hard. So for that, we encourage baby steps. And we also tried to make it a bit easier for you to find information. So Rafaela, who's actually running this webinar right now behind the scenes, she has created with Cassandra Sherlock, who used to work for our team, but is now doing a master's in microplastics at Waterloo, created a wealth of information on our website, which are some tips for reducing waste. You can find these tips also on social media, on our social media pages. If you want to share any tips of your own or your own experience during the waste audit, we welcome them. You can email them to us with pictures, or you can share them directly on social media and hopefully, ideally, tag us at the U of T Trash team, because we would love to be able to see it and follow along. And then in February, you will reach week 4. Eventually, this will end. I know that's sad. At this point in week 4, you will follow the same steps as you did in weeks 2 and 3. But when you complete week 4, then you have to organize and synthesize all of your data if you haven't already, so that you can send it to us. So please make sure it's typed into all of those forms so that it goes to Hannah to synthesize the data. And then the survey data goes to Rafaela to synthesize that data. So if you send us all that data, then that is great. You should also at that point fill out survey 3, and that's the closing survey, to share what actions you took in your household and provide us with a bit of feedback on how you found the audit. Your final survey, which is the follow-up survey, will come in early April after you're done with us, but as a way to check in and see how you found the audit, whether behaviors stick, anything stuck with you, and for us to learn a bit more. And then you will get to sit back, relax, and put your feet up in February. And it's time for us to get to work anonymizing the data, synthesizing the data, and exploring the data, which is our favorite part. We'll be making pretty graphs, running some analyses, and prepping to share it with you in our second webinar, and that's on March 1st. So on March 1st, we hope to see you back here at 7 p.m. where we'll be sharing the data, learning a bit from you about how you found the waste audit, and seeing how we all did overall. And so with that, I will go to Q&A. I will just quickly remind you that you are more than welcome to ask questions in the chat. You are also welcome to raise your hand and ask questions out loud. And while people are starting to prepare those questions, I'm going to ask Susan if there are any questions in the chat where we should begin.
Sure, there were two in the chat. One I answered. I just wanted to check in to make sure it's clear. And that was from Lisa, just wanting to confirm about also counting our recycling. So I'll go ahead and answer that since I'm already talking, and the answer is yes. You'll just fill out a separate spreadsheet data card for your recycling waste in the exact same way with those same categories.
Yeah, and it'll look very similar. So you can see this one says the landfill data sheet, and there's one that'll be a recycling data sheet.
Yeah. So if there's any more questions about that, you can ask again throughout this Q&A. And the second was from Bridget. You had mentioned reducing junk mail, and they are looking for tips on how you did that.
How I did that was I put a sign just on my mailbox that said no junk mail, please. and now it stops coming. Although I had a funny thing happen last weekend where we're looking for a handy person to come and fix something on our door. And my partner was like, don't we have a bunch of flyers that we had found in our mailbox in a drawer? And we did, and they were incredibly useful. And I was like, why haven't we gotten one in a while? And he said, well, that's because we stopped getting junk mail. So unfortunately, sometimes it's useful, but for the most part, it's not. So that's how you get rid of it.
Great. Well, that was it for questions from earlier. There's now a few new ones that are just popping in, so I'll turn it back over to you to go back and forth.
Perfect. And Susan is my first one then by Madeline.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So that is, I can't start the audit right now as I won't be home. Can I begin in about 2 weeks? And the answer is yes. You can begin at any time. Is 2 weeks soon enough, Hannah, for that data to be included in the first or in the next webinar?
I think so. Yeah, I think we also have someone else who's asked already if they can start a week or two late. Yeah, as long as you get the data in as soon as you can after you're finished, I will do my best to get it into the second webinar.
Perfect. Yeah, so that's no problem. We also know that sometimes people don't want to start tomorrow and they might want to take a few days. That's fine. We just hope to get the data early enough that we can synthesize it. Since Hannah's done this a couple times now, it's easier than it was the first time. It's a bit more plug and chug. Okay, really good questions comes from Navshimer. I hope I pronounced your name right, which we get this question a lot. What if one of your housemates doesn't want to do the audit? In that case, what you can do is try to either A, separate out your waste for the week if you're really interested in waste reduction. That might be the best way to do it because maybe it's going to be hard if somebody is not also trying to do the during week 2, 3, and 4 is change behavior. But also if your impact is large enough, you might still see it. Because what you could do is if you wanted to leave it together, what you could do is what I did, which is just empty out the litter at the end of the week. So when I did it, actually, the truth is Luke didn't participate. I was the only one that was trying to actively reduce our waste, and I was the one who counted at the end of the week. So you can do it in a way that's not disruptive to a roommate or someone you live with, but it's up to you whether you want to keep that data together or separate. So hopefully that answers that question. And if not, please feel free to ask for clarification. Ludovic asks, do we record waste we personally produce but don't throw away at our home, i.e. a coffee cup? Do we record waste we personally produced but don't? Oh, like if you throw it away on the street. No. The home waste audit is for the waste that you throw away at home. You are more than welcome to take that extra step of doing it that way if you produce the waste at home and throw it away somewhere else, but you don't have to. In the past, I don't think most people have done that. Is that correct, Hannah? Do you agree with that answer?
Yeah, I agree with that answer.
Okay.
Before we do the next question, I just wanted to also make a note, which Susan reminded me of. If anyone is starting late, throughout the audit, you'll get reminders to fill in the surveys. But if you're starting late, you still need to do your surveys in the correct order. So just make a note of when the survey comes and remember to do it at the end of week 1 or the end of week 2 and so on. If you get right reminders and it's confusing, you can always ask us and we'll help you work out when you're meant to do your surveys.
Awesome. Thanks, Hannah. Another question we have is from Chelsea. If you clean some recyclable plastic, like ones that held sugary drinks or held fruits, can it be counted as recycle or will it contaminate the recycling? If you clean recyclable plastics, yeah, absolutely. So when you have anything that is recyclable should be cleaned of any food, but things that can be cleaned easily is no problem. So even peanut butter jars can be cleaned easily. I think where it becomes the biggest issue is like a styrofoam takeout container that's had a really greasy food in it and you can't get that grease out of the pores of the styrofoam. That's where I think cleaning it becomes impossible. But absolutely, Chelsea, you should clean and recycle. Oh, and then is there a question about tea bags? Yes, do tea bags go to waste? They do. They go to it depends on where you live, where they go. In Toronto, they go into the compost, but that will be a question for you to figure out, or which you will figure out during your quiz at the end of week 1, or you can look it up in advance if you want. But if you don't know now, do what you should do in week 1 is whatever you do now, and then don't change that until week 2 if you don't know yet.
Chelsea, this is Sue, that you don't recognize my voice. I did want to add to the tea bag question because I wonder if others are wondering, does the type of material matter? Like if they have the silk type of tea bags that
Does matter. So yeah, so most tea bags are made out of paper and they have a staple on them. Other tea bags, the fancy ones, are made out of plastic. So it will depend of the material of definitely the material of your tea bag. And these are things you're going to become more hyper aware of than you probably are now or were yesterday. But these are all good questions. So now Tiffany is asking, dirty pizza boxes, recycle or garbage? So again, I can only answer in Toronto. In Toronto, a dirty pizza box actually goes in the trash. They will tell you the green bin, but the reality is it goes to the landfill. You can put it in either, but the clean part can go in recycling. But that's very Toronto specific. And it really varies. Like in the region of Peel, it's even different than in Toronto. Bridget.
Hi. I wanted to ask, like, if I reuse like my like let's say Amazon packaging boxes, if I reuse it as storage, should I record that as recycling?
If you reuse it and keep it, it's not waste. It's become precious material to you. So you don't even have to record it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
great
you.
question. Thanks, Bridget. And yeah, so Kim says in Mississauga, dirty pizza goes in the green bin. I actually think that is the answer in Toronto as well. But I was told by someone that they go to the landfill, and so then I started putting them there. Michael, go ahead.
Hi. So thanks to you for your presentation. So actually for me, I want to figure out a way to reduce my waste, but I just can't. So I know like it's kind of rare for me that I don't eat takeout, I don't drink tea, and the most two waste items are alcohol wipes, masks, I would say. And what are some of the tips you can give to me since I'm staying home all day as a student, not
Yeah.
going out, not eating out?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Some people may already be at kind of the low end of the amount of waste you produce, and it may be hard to get a big reduction. So, Michael, maybe you're one of those people. I think right now, with the pandemic, the recommendation on mask is the disposable ones actually. What we've been told to do too at University of Toronto is actually we buy the KN95s that are disposable, and then what we do is we wear one for a whole day. I buy 4 for the week. I wear one each day, and then I put it in a paper bag or just somewhere in a corner and let it sit for 4 days and then wear it again. So you can reuse those. So that's a way to reduce your waste of those, but I'm not a medical expert. It's just what I've been told by the biological facility at University of Toronto. So you might double check that. For wipes, you could instead go to either the alcohol in a pump, or you could just wash hands with soap and water. So that's kind of up to you. But it is tricky. People who are already pretty waste conscious sometimes have a hard time with a big reduction. But even if you just reduce one thing, then hey, that's a win. So hopefully that helps. Madeline asks, you said that putting wrong things in the recycling contaminate the rest. Is this because they are dirty or because they refuse clean, good recyclable materials if they are close to, okay, let me make sure I understand this. Is this because they are dirty or because they refuse clean, good recyclable materials if they're close to none? Oh no, it's literally if they are dirty. So if like the mechanical recycling process is just to do like a quick coarse wash of the material and then break it all down and melt it back down into the plastic. So if it's got like a greasy or a sticky or a gooey material on it, it goes in the garbage because the mechanism they use to clean it automatically won't clean it off. So clean things in the recycling. So I guess there's two sides to this question. It always depends on where you live, which is annoying to have to say that because it doesn't seem super helpful. But the reason for that is in some cities, so for example, San Francisco, they have people on a production line picking the recycling. So if you put the wrong thing in, somebody's going to go ahead and pull it out. In a place where they also use like lasers or a machine, they may also be able to blow out the things that are not recyclable. But in a place where maybe they don't, the reason why people say that if you recycle wrong, the whole thing may go to landfill, depends on the way that it's sorted. I don't know how often recycling wrong ruins your whole recycling. I think the bigger issue is something that's food ridden or ridden with something yucky. And if anyone else wants to jump in and help answer that question, if you know more, please feel free to.
I think that was a good answer. I have nothing to add.
Okay. Okay, good. Kim says, I have heard that glass jars are very hard to recycle, and if they break, they contaminate all other recyclables, and glass is inert in garbage. So I try just to reuse or put in trash. Any comments about glass jars or bottle? Yeah, I mean, I think the truth is that glass itself is a very recyclable material, but broken glass is a hazard. And so that's why, for example, even at the university, we split up our broken glass from our glass. And so that contaminate in that case is if it's dangerous, and then you can't have people sorting through if you have something that's sharp. So that's why that is. I do put glass in the recycle bin, but if something's easily breakable, I won't. And when you do, usually keep the lid on it when you recycle. And I do want to stress that this idea that everything is different in the city in which you live. So it's always important to look at the guides, which we'll have you do at the end of week 1. Any other questions, either via raised hands or via the chat? These are all great questions.
I have a question about like throwing away broken glass.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm usually like confused on how I should throw it away if it's broken.
Yeah.
I usually like put it in a box and then put it in trash, but like is there like a better way to do it?
That's the best way to do it. So I think most people just put it straight in the trash. And in theory, something that goes to landfill, like the way that they often dump the bin is it gets dumped into the truck and then the trunk dumps it into the landfill. But you may hurt yourself when you take the bin, when you take it out. So what you do actually, Bridget, is exactly what we do at cleanup. So we put it in a hard Tupperware and dispose of it that way. So putting it in a box is a really smart way to do it so that no one gets hurt. Broken glass shouldn't go in the recycling. That goes in the garbage. Mhm. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Zoe, go ahead.
Hi, I was wondering, sometimes like one of my roommates, if they throw something in the compost, they usually throw it in the packaging, which I think it's wrong. But just to confirm, is it like, for example, if they have the little mesh net around mandarin oranges and the whole thing went bad, so they just throw it straight into the compost without separating it?
Yeah, you are correct that that is wrong. That part of the material would go into the landfill. If so, again, it all depends on where you live. In the city of Toronto, Zoe, I'm not encouraging people to do it wrong, so don't take this the wrong way. But the nice thing about our compost is that it enters like a big vat of water basically, and the things that float will float up. So if it's a plastic floating wrapper, the nice thing is it will actually get removed. But you are correct that it shouldn't be going in there. One of a big misconception in Toronto, because they tell you can put diapers in the compost, and then people have this idea that, oh, diapers are environmentally friendly, you can put them in the compost. But really what they're doing is keeping the thing that stinks out of your landfill bin because of raccoons. And what they're doing is they're asking you to put it in your compost bin because they know when it enters the water, it'll float up and they can get it out and take it to landfill. So if you make Did my internet go out for a second when I was explaining about diapers and poop? Hopefully you caught enough. I can repeat if not.
We got to the point where you were talking about them floating and getting taken off.
Okay, you got the most of it. Yeah. So I'm not encouraging to compost wrong, but if it's a floating plastic, our system will help you. Yeah. Okay, we have just a couple more minutes. So if anyone else has questions, we are here and we are happy to continue answering. For those of you that have to sign off because it's dinner time or whatever time zone you're on, maybe you're going to go pick up kids or eat lunch. I don't know, whatever it is, although I think based on what you said, everyone's around here is 8 p.m. So have a lovely evening. Thank you so much for joining us. As I said, we'll stick around if you have any other questions, but really, really excited to have you on board. Hope at least half of you, if not more, continue and follow on with our waste audit. And hopefully we'll see you back here in March. And even if you realize you can't do the whole audit because you just don't have time, you are more than welcome to attend the second webinar and see how everyone else does. So thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
And we'll see you in a bit. And we're still here if you have questions. Because waste is complicated.
Hello, actually, can I ask the question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a little bit late, but so I usually do like compost in this like green green bag that you can buy for the compost.
Mhm.
But I also like noticed that a lot of people who threw out the compost, they just like use the plastic bag.
Yeah.
You know, like, so how does it work? Like how, where this like compost is actually going, and is actually by the end of the day, this plastic is actually on the landfill as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, if you're in Toronto, that's
Yep.
correct. Are you in Toronto, Lisa?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the extra money you're spending on the bin that makes it look like it's greener and going into the compost is just floating up and going to the landfill with the other waste. So what I usually do is I reuse plastic bags that I might get if I get takeout or something and use those in my compost, or even like a bread bag. Sometimes we'll use that for compost as well.
Okay, sounds
Yeah.
good. Yeah, I
Yeah.
usually use this kind of like green bags, like
Mhm.
that, like for the compost specifically. Like, do they work?
Not in Toronto.
Oh, really?
So in the region of Peel,
Mhm.
that would actually be composted because in the region of Peel, a compostable plastic gets composted because they have a compost facility that burns hotter and it will allow for that material. But in the city of Toronto, our compost facility can only take organics. So compostable plastic should actually go to landfill. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it's kind of an unfortunate truth that feels a little bit like greenwashing when you've learned that, and I apologize for the
Okay.
company.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
no,
so
thanks
much.
for asking.
Sorry, question from me then. So about this compost, so do they actually, I guess, open up these plastic bags and take out compost?
So like you mean if you do it in Toronto? Yeah, so the thing that I
Yeah.
was talking about, like it dumps it all in, they have a thing that rips the bag and then it dumps it all in, and then the plastic bag floats up along with the diapers and whatever else happens to be plastic in there that hopefully can float. So it's really just a
Okay.
mechanism to keep the green bin clean and to help keep
Okay.
raccoons away from the food. Not that they can't tear
Okay,
into a
sounds good.
plastic bag. Yeah. Thanks, Jane.
Okay, good to know. Actually, that's very good to know. We can not spend money on the green bags if they don't work then, because they're also
Correct.
pricey.
I know they are. I know
Thanks.
there's a lot of restaurants in Toronto spending extra money on these materials, and unfortunately, they're not necessarily greener here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else before we sign off and eat some dinner that Hannah's going to cook for me? And then fly it to Toronto.
Yeah, it'll take a long time to get to you.
I know. Okay, well, thanks everybody.
Yeah,
Have a
I
good
just want to say
night.
thank
Oh
you.
yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
sorry.
I just wanted to say thank you because it's really, really great that you guys doing it. Like, I really, I really wish like more people were like aware of like plastic and just were like more conscious about what they do for the planet and for themselves. Yeah, and I used to, sorry, I'm just going to be a little bit longer, but I used to work at Starbucks and I was really, really into like initiative of people like taking their own cups, or like us giving people mugs if they're staying in the cafe rather than like taking takeout with them. It's kind of works because like my manager was very supportive, but like once COVID hit, it was very, very difficult to do that. But still right now, so my Jane, who is like here in the call, like she's actually my sister. So like both of us, we all the time we go like to the coffee shop, we take our own like cups with us, and it's very great that a lot of still coffee shops they take their like they can take our cups, so like it's much easier for us not to take like plastic cups and then just like waste them, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for everything you do. That's awesome. You know, we do this because there are people like you who care. And are you both volunteers on the trash team? So is this the same Jane
No,
that did the social media post?
yeah, it's only Jane for now, but I'm thinking maybe I can join the team too.
You should, Lisa,
Yeah.
and because I'm thinking this as you say this about it being interested in these reusable programs. Rafaela's leading research program on this, and she might be looking for people to help her. So if that's a project
Okay,
you want to
sounds
get
good.
involved
Yeah,
in.
of
Hmm.
course. Okay, maybe I'll message you guys then. Send the
Okay,
email. Yeah.
awesome.
Thank you so much.
Definitely, you can contact us.
Awesome. Of course. Thank
All
you.
right. Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you. All right. Well, good night, you two.